Hi, my name's Tim Clark. I'm a director with Harrison Clark Chartered Surveyors, and today we're going to be talking about how we assess loss in a dilapidations situation. Firstly, I should state that this video is not an encyclopedic explanation of how dilapidations loss is assessed, as this is a very big subject. Rather, this is an introduction to some of the themes that commonly arise. The guiding principle is that if a breach of the lease does not leave the landlord in a worse financial position than they should be, they have suffered no loss. Typically, the landlord will incur a loss either because he has to spend money to rectify matters or because his property is now worth less money as a result of breaches of the lease. So one way to assess dilapidations loss is if a landlord acting reasonably completes remedial works for building. This will come at a cost. This is the most common way to assess dilapidations loss, but not the only way. It is relatively straightforward to agree settlements based on works completed. Just because the landlord has completed works though, it doesn't always mean that they were necessary, so you should still ask a dilapidations surveyor for advice before you inadvertently pay thousands of pounds to your landlord, which might really not be necessary. If the lease breaches have led to a reduction in the market value of the property, this reduction in value can be calculated by an experienced registered valuer. The difference in value between the building as it was at lease end and what it should have been like had the tenant complied with their lease requirements is known as a diminution valuation. Under Section 18(1) of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1927, a landlord cannot be entitled to damages in excess of this sum arising from disrepair. Common law has taken this further in recent years, meaning that the diminution valuation now also tends to cap the entire dilapidations claim rather than just items related to disrepair. Here's a word that you don't often see outside of dilapidations. Superssion is where the landlord supersedes the requirement to complete works by demolishing the affected building, either totally or in part. For example, there would be no reason to pay the landlord damages for failing to decorate a wall if he plans to remove the wall. In a situation such as this, some or all of the claim will fall away, even if the tenant has not completely adhered to their lease covenants. This also often arises if a landlord intends to refurbish a property to meet modern expectations. If a landlord decides not to complete remedial work, sometimes waiting to see what happens next, can play to a tenant's advantage, as often a dilapidations claim will naturally drop away if a new tenant takes the property on the same or similar lease terms. If this is the case, the new tenant will carry the liability to put right some or all of the technical breaches of the lease, often meaning that the landlord has incurred no loss, but will ask the new tenant to ameliorate any issues at the end of their lease term instead. This should not be seen as passing the buck. The reason for this is that many tenants are happy to let properties which fall below the standard required by a full repairing and insuring lease, often because their fit-out works do not depend on the entire building being in good repair. If a new tenant takes a lease restricted by a photographic schedule of condition, however, the landlord could still have a claim against the former tenant, as there is still a future obligation for them to complete works rendered necessary by the former tenant's lack of adherence to their lease covenants. However, unless the content of the schedule of condition is exactly aligned with the schedule of dilapidations, it may be that some claim items drop away. Finally, a new tenant might negotiate an enhanced rent-free period to put right dilapidations items. This means that the new tenant will effectively complete remedial works on the landlord's behalf for a fixed reduction in rent payable. So for example, if a claim totaled £50,000, but the additional rent-free period granted in connection with the dilapidated condition of the property to the new tenant is equivalent to £10,000, this should limit a dilapidations claim to £10,000 plus reasonable costs. The costs that the landlord can reclaim from a tenant will be set out within the lease. For a landlord to make a successful claim for the value of an enhanced rent-free period, we would expect to see contemporaneous evidence that the additional rent-free period is actually connected to the former tenant's outstanding dilapidations work, rather than, for example, the new tenant upgrading the property. For this reason, your dilapidations surveyor will need to see background documentation for the new lease, such as heads of terms. If it is not clearly documented that the rent-free period is connected to disrepair, usually claims calculated using this methodology will fail. Often, VAT will be included in a dilapidations claim, even where the landlord is not entitled to this. More correctly, as damages payments are not subject to VAT, a claim for damages in lieu of VAT might be made. Damages in lieu of VAT can be confusing as there are a number of rules governing whether a landlord should be entitled to receive this. As a rule of thumb, damages in lieu of VAT can be claimed if the building is not elected for VAT, meaning that VAT is not paid on rent, and the landlord has completed the works for which they are claiming damages in lieu of VAT on. If the building is elected for VAT and VAT is therefore paid on rent, this means that the landlord can reclaim VAT from the taxman, and as such this is not a head of loss. Equally, if the works have not yet been completed, it is unproven whether the landlord will have to pay VAT at all, and as such this element should be excluded from a claim, as a VAT loss cannot be proven. Don't worry, dilapidations is a highly specialised area of the law and can be extremely confusing. As luck would have it, we have a team of experienced, friendly dilapidation surveyors who understand the ins and outs of dilapidations and how to assess dilapidations loss. They will be pleased to assist you and to discuss your claim or help you to plan for your upcoming lease end. They can be contacted on 02381 550051 for expert advice. We look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you for watching this video. If you need more information but are not yet ready to call us, this video is the final part of a structured 8-part video series on dilapidations. If you haven't already, check out our other dilapidations explainer videos on our YouTube channel along with some other great content on the built environment. Search for Harrison Clark YouTube.